we're confident in what we're saying. And what does that lead to? Well, what Malcolm Turnbull was saying, and I agree with this, it's just sensible. If you're confronted with such solid, publicly available, reliable information, would that not suggest that you should at least look, in some respects, at some alternative? And so what might that be? Now, I think there's a couple of elements to that. So there are a number of ways in which we could approach this problem, and this is Malcolm Turnbull's suggestion that we should look at what the alternatives actually are. And in the forum on Monday, Rear Admiral Peter Briggs, who's very knowledgeable and expert in the field in Australia in submarines, he said that the answer that would suit us actually better than the Virginia anyway would be the French submarine of the Barracuda-Class, which is a smaller nuclear-powered submarine that has a number of attractions from Australia's point of view. The first is it's got a much smaller crew. It's got a crew about the same size as Collins, slightly larger. It's, for many people, an attractive attribute is that it has a nuclear reactor which is powered by low-enriched uranium, not high-enriched uranium, which the American and British submarines do. And why is that attractive? Well, it's attractive because we can refuel the submarine in Australia. We would have to do that more often than with the others, but we're already refueling a low-enriched uranium reactor routinely in Australia at Lucas Heights. And as I understand it, the technology for the refueling of the smaller French submarine is well tried and proven, and the process takes a couple of weeks. So This is not as big a deal as people might think. It's certainly not as big a deal as refueling an American or a British nuclear reactor, even though their life is 30 years and the life of the fuel is 30 years. And the French submarine, that's probably 10, and in our use, given the distance, is probably less than that. But it's a more digestible thing. So it's a smaller submarine. It would take less man-hours to build, a smaller crew, and in other respects, as far as we can judge, not greatly dissimilar from the capability that we have with Collins, except that it's nuclear powered. So now there's tangible and intangible issues associated with that as a plan B. The tangible issues, it's unlikely that France would have the capacity of its own, given its submarine programs.
Yep.
And I mean, all of these are not production lines. These are shipyards in which the workforce is at capacity all the time or pretty close.
Right.
The inescapable conclusion, therefore, is if we were to, and this applies no matter what the submarine is pretty much, and it does certainly apply to AUKUS, and it goes to the intent that the governments have announced consecutively, but certainly with the French submarine, we would have to build it in Australia. Okay, that's a fact. It's a proposal that we were pursuing. The government had said we will build them in Australia. We probably won't build Virginias in Australia, and that's not part of the AUKUS plan. So, yeah, we have to accept that. That's a tangible. The French submarine is a tangible. And those three countries are the only countries that we could actually engage with if we want a nuclear-powered submarine.
Right.
We're unlikely
the Swedes and the Germans and the Japanese can't do that.
No, none of those countries operate nuclear-powered submarines, and the only other countries today who do,
selling us,
China and Russia, and they probably wouldn't be interested, and we probably wouldn't ask anyway. In the future, maybe Brazil, but they're not well progressed in their program. But there's no one else. So France is the only submarine plan B, if you like. So and that's the tangible. The intangible is all of those unknowns. Why did we dump them in the first place? And there's a whole lot of stuff here that goes to the nature of the relationship that exists between the United States and other countries. And the nature of the relationship between the United States and Great Britain is fundamentally different from the nature of the relationship between the United States and France. And the United States would far rather Australia be reliant on them for our submarine capability than be reliant on the French for a whole bunch of reasons that I won't go into, some of which are quite sensitive, and some of them are, can't be sort of factually grounded anywhere anyway, even though I know that there are some particular issues that exist there. So just simply to leave it at, the US would probably be very unhappy if we were to go to them and say, hey, listen, how about we let you off the hook with Virginias, because we can see that you're not going to deliver them. You can't, and we don't want to be left in the lurch. And we'll alleviate that burden from you, all the other AUKUS bits and pieces, and we'll go and do SSNs with the French. What that will do is increase the size of the submarine pie in the Indo-Pacific area, which is what I think we're all trying to do. We're not trying to subdivide the existing pie, because that's not going to make it bigger, and it's certainly not going to make it any more efficient. This is an approach which will alleviate your problem industrially, plus also providing an increase to the size of the pie available potentially for allied use in this part of the world. So the intangibles carry a lot of weight, and at the conference on Monday, people were saying it's just unthinkable that we would go grovelling back to the French, having insulted them when we ditched them only a matter of a few years ago. This is just not conceivable. This is laughable, in fact. All right, well, the tangibles are inescapable. The intangibles, well, is there a way to manage that? I don't know. But Malcolm Turnbull's point, I think, is entirely valid. We should at least look at this.
Yep.
Because this plan A really doesn't look terribly healthy. So then there's another plan B that is not that, recognising that if it's a submarine answer, if it's a nuclear submarine answer, France is the only potential plan B. All right, what if plan B is not submarines at all? What if plan B is other capabilities that may not be quite as effective or complete as the nuclear submarine is that we're seeking to acquire, but might go some way to offsetting not having any submarine capability at all?
And this is what was called the Echidna strategy. Is it echoing what in Europe is now being called the Porcupine strategy? They're obviously similar animals viewed from the outside. Could you go into a bit more detail about that?
Well, exactly. And I think the Porcupine strategy has been a subject of a book written by Sam Roggeveen of the Lowy Institute, which is well worth reading. I mean, all of these things that add to the contest of ideas, I think, are really worth examining carefully. And when you confront the potential for us to actually end up within a decade or so having, or knowing that we are facing having no submarines at all, that we have had to retire the Collins class, that we will not get the Virginias, and the British submarine is still a decade